I assume that they will explain as to why the New York Times didn't get into this. But here's the other side of the story. I believe this accusation. I believe this allegation. Let me just make that very clear, especially because, once again, there are other friends with correspondence from before Graham Platner became a known entity, right? That's very important. I'm saying it. It's time to talk about Graham Platner now, because that's the top news story. For those of you who don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Graham Platner is this Bernie-crat candidate that came out of the gate swinging, anti-war, anti-Israel, pro-Medicare for all, but had a checkered past, right? A lot of red flags in his background, and he was doing phenomenally well against Janet Mills, the current governor of Maine. He defeated Janet Mills thoroughly, handily. Janet Mills dropped out, as a matter of fact, when the primaries took place. And here's the thing: a lot of establishment Democrats hate this guy, right? A lot of people in the pro-Israel side hate this guy. And in the past, he had been the recipient of a lot of attacks. Many of these attacks were somewhat silly. Some of them were unsubstantiated. And the criticisms that he should have received were obviously criticisms about his background, his investment into, his numerous tours and then going back into Blackwater, things like that. Those were red flags for me. The Nazi tattoo was a red flag for me. Those weren't red flags for the average American, and certainly not the average Mainer. But then the New York Times came out with this reporting, right? The New York Times came out with this report, and they had said this is an unbelievable allegation that's about to come out. They highlighted the report as though there was a serious sexual assault allegation. And when the New York Times report came out, it turns out that was not the case, right? They looked at his background. They interviewed 7 of Graham Platner's former partners. Most of them actually had nothing but nice, kind words to say about him. And one of the two said that there was one moment that she did not feel great about, and then the other was a Republican operative that said Graham Platner had done the classic male manipulator, domestic abuser moment, the risk control, right? This article seemingly is bad. This article seemingly is different. Okay? There's a Politico article out. Now, I don't know how the New York Times missed this. I don't know how the New York Times did not get this information. By no means am I defending Platner, but American voters' cognitive dissonance about voting for rapists is frustrating, aka Trump's fine, but for Mainers, but Platner is not. It should always be a disqualifier across the board. Yes. And Politico piece, I assume we'll get into it, but we'll look at it now, right? Platner also immediately, because of the severity of the allegations, it seems that they were ready for the Platner camp actually canceled a bunch of events. I think they said the wife was sick or something. I don't know. So let's take a look at the latest Graham Platner. New York Times knew this, but the conversation was off the record. Okay. Woman who dated Graham Platner says he sexually assaulted her. The Maine Democrat denied the allegations and said any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically untrue. A woman who dated Maine U.S. Senate candidate Graham Platner says he forced her to have sex with him nearly 5 years ago, despite her repeated objections, an allegation Platner denies. The woman, a 41-year-old Maine resident named Jenny Rassicott, detailed the alleged incident to Politico in 3 interviews over the past 2 weeks. Politico also spoke with a man Rassicott dated and confided in the years after the alleged incident, and reviewed documents, including emails between Rassicott and her therapist and messages between Rassicott and acquaintance. That is curtains. Okay? Mossad paid her ass? No. That is the trifecta. Okay? That is the trifecta of a reliable allegation. That's holy shit. Okay? Personal firsthand testimony to a friend, a close confidant, back from back from way before Graham Platner ever ran for Congress. Are you kidding me? And then also direct testimony from a therapist. That is very different. It's very different from a Republican operative coming out and being like, oh yeah, I had a touch and go moment with Graham Platner. I wouldn't even say he like physically abused me or anything. That's very different. There's not direct testimony from a therapist. No, sorry. Emails between Rasicot and her therapist. Okay. Emails that are dated. That seems a little bit different than previous statements and previous things that were talked, previous discussions around Graham Platner's misconduct or alleged misconduct. Okay? What I don't understand is why the New York Times didn't report it, but apparently the Political article gets into that. So we'll take a look at it. So, reviewed documents including emails between Rasicot and her therapist and messages between Rasicot and an acquaintance whom she warned against getting involved with Platner years before he ran for office. Rasicot says she had an on and off relationship with Platner, who is now the Democratic Senate nominee in Maine, for more than 2 years before he entered her rural Maine home uninvited one night, in late 2021, deeply intoxicated, and forced himself on her while she repeatedly told him to stop. She said she cut off contact with him. So this is one of the two. Rasicot is the other. New York Times, if you recall, interviewed 7 former girlfriends of Graham Platner. There was one that said she had a bad moment with Graham Platner. This, I think, expands on what that bad moment was with a very significant allegation. Trigger warning, I will be reading out depictions of sexual assault from this point on. She said she cut off contact with him after telling him the encounter was not consensual. I remember him grabbing my pelvis and being really forceful of me, she said. I remember the specific moment where I thought to myself, like, this is no longer my choice. Platner denied the allegations. These allegations are troubling, serious, and false. Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically untrue, he said in a statement. Rasicot previously described reckless and unsettling behavior by Platner to the New York Times, but she says she didn't go public with the specific assault claim because she didn't want to be known as a rape victim. Rasicot said she later felt compelled to go public about her experience because the reaction to the Times story was dominated by controversy about another woman, Lindsay Fifield, who alleged Platner mistreated her and faced attacks because of her ties to the Republican Party. Contacted by Politico, Fifield stood by the allegations she made to the Times and declined to comment further. My part of the story was just a read-over, Rasicot said in an interview, and the story was just Lindsay and the accusations of her being politically motivated. Rasicot said she was torn over coming forward in part because she agrees with Platner politically. One of the reasons I didn't come forward sooner was the huge moral conflict that I had between supporting his politics but not supporting him as a person, she said. I just want the truth out there. I just want people to have the whole scope of who he is as a person. In a statement, the Platner campaign reiterated his denial and accuses critics of trying to drive him out of the race. These allegations are very serious, and Graham vigorously denies them. They are also coached and coordinated by out-of-state establishment operatives. For a year, opponents of this campaign have thrown everything they can at Graham, calling him a Nazi, a war criminal, and a communist. None of it has been true, and this is no different. It is not a coincidence that this story comes a week before the ballot deadline, just as the previous false allegations came a week before the primary. Graham began this campaign to fight for a Maine where everyone is treated with dignity and where Mainers are put first, and no amount of desperate smears will stop this movement from seeing that vision through. What do you mean audio? What's wrong with the audio? Platner, an oysterman and political newcomer when he launched his Senate campaign last August, easily won the Democratic primary last month to face GOP Senator Susan Collins in one of the nation's most highly watched Senate races. His remarkable rise has been tainted by controversies including offensive online comments and allegations of past mistreatment of women. He has not previously been accused of sexual assault. So here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. This is a serious accusation of the highest order, and it has all of the hallmarks of a verifiable accusation. Okay, conversations in the past, far before Graham Platner came on the scene as a political operative, is a fairly reliable way to verify these accusations. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. Okay, like As you guys know, my policy on this is, believe women doesn't mean reflexively assume that all women are incapable of telling a lie or anything. It just means like don't reflexively disbelieve women, right? And contemporaneous communications is huge, especially if they are before he was in politics. Exactly. Central Committee is correct on this. It's a huge part of this. Okay. I assume that they will explain as to why the New York Times didn't get into this, but here's the other side of the story. Okay. I believe this accusation. I believe this allegation. Let me just make that very clear, especially because, once again, there are other friends with correspondence from before Graham Platner became a known entity, right? That's very important because you're not actively seeking to a person if that person is not a political operative at all, right? Like, that's a random oyster fisherman, okay? It's a random oyster fisherman at that point in Maine. The timing of this, on the other hand, is once again up. The timing of the drop is in the column of rat, but the accusations are certainly real. Okay? Do with that information what you will, but the accusations, they are as credible as it is going to get. Okay? Unless the correspondence between Rassicot and her friend is not from back then, or the other partner that Rassicot had, which I have no reason to believe that that's the case, for the record. Okay, it still ultimately lends itself to a verifiable and credible accusation. Both the therapist and the friend refused to comment. This needs receipts. So let's continue. Is this rat if they're giving him time to drop out, I guess? Well, we'll get into that in a second. The Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran has linked some of his behavior to mental health struggles and alcohol abuse, but he says he's changed and has denied previous claims that he was abusive to women. Rassicot told Politico she connected with Platner on the dating app Bumble in 2019 and had consensual relations with him prior to the night he allegedly assaulted her. That night in late 2021, she said she had exchanged text messages with him and told him not to come over, saying she wasn't in the mood for company. Later that evening, she said she realized when he heard a sound on the stairs that he had let himself into her house, which was unlocked. Platner came up the stairs, Rassicot said, to where she was on a couch. He got on top of her, kept grabbing her, she said, while she repeatedly told him to stop and that she wasn't interested. Rassicot said she smelled of alcohol in his breath and believed he was almost blackout drunk because Platner kept ignoring her protests and continued to grab her after knocking over an antique sewing kit, spilling small needles everywhere. I'd been telling him these words, no, don't, she recalled. And the look on his face, realizing what was happening, I just realized that, like, I'm in a situation where there's no consent here, she said. Rassicot said she tried to separate herself from Platner by telling him she couldn't be in that room anymore, after which he followed her to the bedroom and had sex with her against her will. She said he also ejaculated inside of her despite her telling him not to, as she was not using birth control at the time. Oof. Oh, that's brutal. She went to clean herself up, she said, and when she returned, Platner had fallen asleep. She contemplated waking him up to kick him out, but worried he could hurt someone driving in the state that he was in. The following morning, she said, Platner tried to put his arm around her, and she pushed him away. She said she asked him whether he remembered what had happened the previous night. According to Rassicot, Platner said he didn't remember. Rassicot said she told him to leave and never contact her again. Rassicot said she waited several weeks until she got her period to ensure she wasn't pregnant, then sent Platner a private message on Instagram saying that the encounter was not consensual and she did not want to hear from him ever again. Rassicot had no further contact with him after that, she said. Rassicot said she later deleted all of her text and social media correspondence with Platner as she tried to move on from the assault, and said she has not been able to recover the Instagram messages she sent him about the incident. In the weeks after the alleged assault, Rassicot says she considered going to the police but struggled with shock and confusion about what had happened to her and did not file a police report. Even as time passed, she said she felt uncomfortable potentially telling a police officer about such a personal experience and feared retaliation from Platner. At first, she confided only in her therapist, who she continues to see. Rassicot showed Politico recent emails with her therapist in which Rassicot explained she was talking to the media about her relationship with Platner and said the sexual assault rape using an abbreviation for sexual assault. In the message, Rascott was not ready to go public and was seeking help corroborating her account in conversations she was having with the reporters on condition of anonymity. Her therapist responded that Rascott shouldn't have to speak publicly about a traumatic incident in order to be believed, without referencing details of any particular incident. Rasico, the T is silent. Rasico, okay. Yeah, not going to the police is perfectly normal in situations like this, for the record, just so you guys understand. So they don't have, the therapist who Politico agreed not to name at her request declined to comment when reached on Monday. So Rasico also shared details about the alleged assault to the man she dated after Platner, who she began dating in 2022. The man, who was granted anonymity out of concern for his personal privacy, told Politico that Rasico had told him in bits and pieces about a bad experience with Platner before confiding the full details of what happened in 2023. His account of what Rasico told him about the incident matched what Rasico told Politico. Okay. Rasico shared with Politico a series of private Facebook messages she exchanged with an acquaintance in 2023, about a year and a half after the alleged assault and well before Platner launched his political career, in which she cautioned the acquaintance against getting involved with Platner. In the messages, Rasico says she had ended up in a bad situation with him, describing Platner as a consensually careless and saying he doesn't listen to you when drunk. Reached out by Politico, the acquaintance said she received the messages but declined the comment. Politico granted her anonymity at a request to protect her privacy in her main community. What's his deal? Should I not fix him up with my friend, assuming he's single? He can be charming and funny, and he's a decently intelligent person, but he's not all bad. But I ended up in a bad situation with him, and I will just very politely call him consensually careless at times. When drunk, plus PTSD. I knew about the PTSD. He lies also. Forces himself on people. Wait, what? That's the cutoff? There's more, click the arrow. Oh. No, this is the earlier. I saw your post about oysters the other day. I feel morally obligated to warn you if you were anything more than just friends with Graham. But if you're not, then I'll just shut up for now and give you the scoop sometime, lol. Just friends. Would love the scoop, though. Is he still engaged? I was working on fixing on a friend. Oh, I have no idea. With who? Oh, a girl. I think her name is Jen from like the Rockland area. I don't know. I haven't heard of anyone. He was as of last summer that I know of, but also my timeline's a little sketch, so maybe it was the summer before. But either way, they've been on and off, but then I was told they got engaged. Yeah, COVID totally messed up my timeline for everything. What's his deal? Should I not fix him up with my friend, assuming he's single? He lies also. Okay, so here is they were out of order. I don't know why the Politico put it out of order like this. God damn it. A bunch of boomers, I guess. Forced himself on people. One thing that grossed me out after him and I had dated was that I saw his profile on OkCupid, and that site asked a lot of questions. And one of the questions was, if your partner told you they had over 100 sexual partners, what would your response be? And his response was, that's not that many. So that super grossed me out, thinking he's probably slept with a ton of people. Doesn't listen to you when drunk, ... Yeah. So that's corroboration. That's backing up her, previous assessment. But I don't know what she says. I don't know what the other lady says after this. And then I don't know what her response is afterwards. But Politico also spoke with a friend Rasico had told about the alleged assault last summer, shortly after Platner launched his campaign. The friend, to whom Politico granted anonymity due to fear of social and professional backlash, recalled Rasico telling her about the incident, including that Platner had been very drunk and wouldn't take no for an answer. Rasico said she was contacted by the New York Times in the spring and shared off the record that Platner had assaulted her. She told the Times that she had some positive memories of her relationship with Platner, but thought he did not respect women and had cut off contact with him after an incident in 2021 when Platner had come over drunk. But the Times article stated that Rasico declined to elaborate about what had happened, only describing his behavior as reckless and unsettling. A spokesperson for the Times declined to comment. After the publication of the Times report, Rasico connected with Cheyenne Hunt, a progressive Democratic lawyer who founded the nonprofit Reckoning Action, which launched earlier this year to fight misogyny. Hunt, who had endorsed Platner last fall but renounced her support for him after the Times article. So I remember this. This is the random lady who was like who came out and was like, I hate Graham Platner and stuff like that. And I initially thought that it was because of some potential foreign intervention. It turns out it was because of this story. Hunt, who had endorsed Platner last fall, renounced her support for him after the Times article, previously supported women who came forward with assault allegations against former Representative Eric Swalwell earlier this year, prompting him to drop out of the California gubernatorial primary and resign from Congress. NBC News previously reported that Hunt was working with multiple women who had past relations with Platner. Hunt connected Politico to Rasico. Reckoning action exists to confront misogyny in American life in all forms and manifestations, including in bad actors being elected to positions of power, Hunt said. We became aware of the allegations before ever being connected with Jenny and have been in contact with multiple women with really troubling allegations, and it just became clear that this is someone who is not fit to hold public office. After the Times report last month, Platner had said that allegations of physical misconduct were simply not true, and his allies seized on Fifield's conservative political affiliations to suggest that her allegations against him in the Times were motivated by politics. I still stand by what I said about Fifield, by the way, especially considering that she spent a good deal of time not just like being a Republican operative, but specifically defending Brett Kavanaugh against those very real allegations. Brett Kavanaugh then also turned around and literally denied women bodily autonomy. Like, you know, hundreds of millions of women on U.S. soil were impacted by Brett Kavanaugh's lies. So I will once again stand by my previous statements on that story. This is a different situation, I think. Like, here's the thing. There is, I mean, this is as airtight as it's going to get as far as allegations goes, right? As far as allegations goes, this is fairly airtight, okay? And it's not even because if you remember, I said this about Fifield as well. If you recall in my commentary on the Fifield allegations, I said if there was corroboration at the time from friends of Lindsay Fifield, it wouldn't matter whether or not she was a Republican operative, right? If you recall, that's what I said. This seems to me like there is corroboration. Now, the only thing that would be potentially the only thing that would be in defense of Graham Platner here, which is, it seems, the allegations that seem super credible and indefensible, would be if there was like financial, if there was any sort of financial entanglement between a friend, but it doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, it's very, very unlikely. You know what I mean? Just so you guys understand. And the reason why I'm taking this position is to show you that there is a lot of veracity to these claims. Like even in the most heavily scrutinized version of events, in order for this allegation to be untrue, would only happen if this experience is real and she felt uncomfortable by this experience, understandably, because this is, you know, clear-cut date rape under the influence of alcohol, right? But she previously did not, she felt conflicted about it, maybe confided in her friends, maybe confided in her therapist, worked through it. And then after the fact, and breaking and entering as well, which is, you know, not the main point here. Obviously, the violation of consent of someone's, you know, bodily autonomy in the process of a date rape is probably, you know, it's a breaking and entering is also another violation of consent, but nowhere near as significant as, you know, rape. For this to be untrue, she would have had to been slandering him in 2023 because no. This is much worse than the allegation that Fifield made. That's why I'm saying it's credible 100%, right? No, what I'm saying is, like, I don't think it's disputed that Graham Platner actually violated this person's consent. There's no dispute there at all. Okay? None. Because it's ridiculous, right? It would be totally ridiculous. Bro, it's just rape, not date rape. I mean, date rape is rape, chatters. There's no distinction. I mean, it's just rape. It's violent sexual assault. So here's the thing. What I was trying to say is this definitely happened, right? For this to be something that she's like reconsidering, regardless of whether or not it happened, because that is not in dispute at all. But for her to like reconsider and then come out right now, the only thing that would tarnish the credibility of this the victim here would be if there was like any additional coaching or something, or if like outside groups came in and were like, hey, this is a serious allegation, you should definitely come out and speak on it. And even then that happens at times, because it takes a lot of courage for victims to come out in instances where they're accusing someone of sexual assault, especially when the person that they're accusing of sexual assault is now running for Senate and is a fairly popular candidate, right? So no matter what, this seems very, very reliable. And it doesn't even matter if there's it doesn't even, like, there would need to literally be like money exchanged, okay? There would need to have been money exchanged literally by like an outside group or something for this to come across as in any way, shape, or form like a potential rat operation, and not someone who is reconsidering the experiences that they went through and the very real allegations of sexual assault. Okay? Once again, I'm trying to give you the most critical lens here as someone who definitely believes Rasico's firsthand account here, especially because, like I said, contemporaneous conversations from back then with other people, especially before Graham Platner became like a known political figure, it's consistent with true testimony. Okay. Anyway. Wow. Yeah, she even said she still agrees with his politics. Like, it's I mean, that doesn't even matter. Let's be real. Like, whether, guys, I need you to understand something, okay? From my perspective, I looked at Lindsay Feefield's testimony, and what did I tell you? Her politics are secondary in this, even though it was directly related to the Brett Kavanaugh situation and doing PR for Brett Kavanaugh, which obviously makes her a less credible accuser. However, the real reason, as I repeatedly told you back then, was that there was no contemporaneous conversations. There were no conversations that Lindsay Feefield had had with her friends about Graham Platner, beyond being like, oh yeah, he's a bit of a rough shot. He's a bit of a rough guy. There was never something as clear cut as Lindsay Feefield confiding in a friend, or confiding in a new partner, or going to therapy. Like, there was no secondhand testimony that you could go to. And I said at the time, if there was, that would mean that this is a credible accusation regardless. If there was at the time a credible accusation, regardless of her background as a political operative, that would be a credible accusation nonetheless. On MS Now last month, after the New York Times report, Platner denied claims that he had physically mistreated women, anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew my tattoo was. These are statements of someone who's politically motivated. He told MS Now, alluding to unrelated allegations about a tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol. Platner had the tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol covered up last fall and said he had not known what the symbol meant. Rasico said she was bothered by Platner's public denial that he had been physical towards women. I know that he's capable of putting his hands on women, she said, so I don't believe that to be the truth. So that's the Politico reporting. Now let's get to great suit. Your suit arc must be permanent, I think. Thank you. Not the point. Graham Platner came out with a statement after this article came out.
I wanted to directly address the troubling, serious, and false allegations against me. Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false. Over the last 10 months, I have been deeply humbled by the faith Mainers have put in me. You have welcomed me into your homes, into your places of work, into your restaurants, into your houses of worship. You have shown that a different kind of politics, one that puts the interests of people over corporations, is not just possible, but is inevitable. This movement we have built.
What is this? When did you / what made you change your stance on this after the news broke a few weeks ago, during which you downplayed it? Did you read the Politico article where the victim literally said she did not feel comfortable revealing the full extent of Graham Platner's actions? You know, this is an entirely new article. This is the same victim with actual allegations. I did not yet. So why did you come in here with this assessment then? Are you okay? This new article came out an hour ago. This new article actually has like verifiable and very credible allegations of sexual assault. The previous article, which featured the same victim, did not have these allegations. And what's interesting about it is that the New York Times did not report on it. It was a choice that she had made. From what I understand, there's going to be a story beyond the choices that the media made. New York Times simply called it unsettling behavior. That was Rasico's statement on the record. Very different. Unsettling behavior can be a wide range of things. Lots of centrists blaming you today for Graham Platner. Out of all of the crop of left populist candidates, Graham Platner is the one left populist candidate that I have not done any campaigning with. It's the one left populist candidate that I have shown scrutiny towards at times. Incredible. Pills Mafia till the bitter end. Okay, I'm not going to joke right now. Anyway. Yeah, rape is just a tool for quote-unquote leftists to weaponize against the streamers they hate the most. Fuck these online losers. I know.
The largest volunteer base in the history of Maine politics, the hundreds of thousands of grassroots donors, and the supporters across the ideological spectrum, we were united in a love of Maine, a belief that our politics must change, and a focus on defeating Susan Collins. So,
this might be an unfair question, but I would like to know what you think should be done if Platner drops out and if there's still a road to go for Maine. I mean, I think it's cooked. I think it's cooked. I think he probably will drop out, and I don't know what else to say about it other than holy shit, Susan Collins. I mean, talk about a person that just. This video is like 95% pablum, by the way, just so you know. Yeah, I mean, he came out of the gate swinging with the denial. If Platner drops out, his hardcore supporters would be insanely pissed, and Collins will absolutely win. Any replacement will be seen as an establishment stooge. Yeah, if Platner drops out, it has to be a commie. Chris Rabb being skeptical when questioned about Platner a few weeks ago is just so justified right now. AOC staying away from the Graham Platner campaign comes across as fairly. I mean, it just looks very different in hindsight. Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of red flags that I also pointed to. This is beyond red flags, though. This is irredeemable. I said it even back then. I said it even before the New York Times report came out, where I said, like, look, if there's sexual assault, and it's over. It's irredeemable. It's unacceptable. And it's true. It remains. It remains to be the case. Yeah, Washington Reporter exclusive. Graham Platner to drop out of Maine Senate race, giving Democrats time to replace him is what they're looking for. Susan Collins, a supporter of the rapist POTUS, is going to win because the alternative is a rapist to our society is so incredibly now. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a clear cut. This is not like any of the other allegations. This is not on shaky ground. This is as open and shut as it gets. Okay? Apologize to everyone who's been warning you about Graham Platner from the beginning, you performative coward. Yeah, okay, dude.
Regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict, We are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people.
I love when, you know what's funny? I love when people go, hey, this ginormous incident with significant accusations of sexual assault took place that's shaking up national news. How can I make this about my least favorite Twitch streamer? Are you okay? How are you any different than the weirdo Epstein fans who literally saw October 7 and then watched as Israel started bombing Gaza, immediately killing more people than October 7, and went to work to be like, this is our opportunity to make sure that we compile every single thing that Hasan says so we can make this a national story later down the line. If you see, incidents taking place of national consequence and your first thought is, how do I make this about a Twitch streamer? You're not going to make it. Shut the up. You need help.
That I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susan Collins. Those were the goals when we launched this campaign, and they remain my goals today. On June 9th, 154,058 Mainers, the most in primary history, voted to reject a broken politics beholden to Washington and the donor class. They voted for hope, for change, to take back our economy, to take back our power.
We're not making it about our least favorite Twitch streamer. We're asking for some accountability since you absolutely give positive coverage to this guy after knowing what he did in the Middle East. You're supposed to be on our side, but you run cover for people you know are war criminals, even though sexual assault is where you draw the line. I'm gonna move on from this. Okay? Please shut the up. Please.
And to take back our Senate seat. Throughout it all, you never turned your back on me, and I will not turn my back on you now. Every one of you deserves to see that vision come to fruition and see Susan Collins defeated, and we will use every tool at our disposal to do so. As Maine goes, so goes the nation.
Genuinely, he's saying that Platner's entire defense of this is just nuh-uh. He's saying that there were a coordinated smear campaign and coaching, but if that was the case, he put that shit on the limelight yesterday, instead nothing. Yeah. Does your community seriously believe that being in the military means automatically you're a war criminal? No. But there are some in my community that does, definitely. There are definitely people on the left who automatically go, oh, you touched a machine gun. You were in the American military. The American military is an imperialist force. You have done war crimes. It's understandable why people arrive at that conclusion, for the record, because many who do active duty combat, who see active duty combat, engage in things like that. My scrutiny of this, of Graham Platner's background, came from his 4 tours plus Blackwater, but it wasn't enough for me to say, like, this is I'm pulling out of this. I wanted to and made the effort to try to interview him specifically on that and never got the opportunity to do so. For the record, they were very dodgy about, they were initially interested, but then when I offered my scrutiny very publicly, the campaign was somewhat dodgy about it, and I never got to actually ask him personally about some of these questions that I had. But if you recall, one of the things that I had said on a Pod Save America podcast was a comparison between Abdullah al-Sayed and Graham Platner. Let me see if I can find it. This was during the Pod Johns conference that I went to, and I think it's important to bring that up right now. What is it? It was Alex Wagner's podcast.
Hi, everyone. On election night last Tuesday,
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it from the transcript. Wait, how do you look at the transcript? Oh, here.
I got to ask you, because we were talking about Nazis and the left and the right versus the left, but like, do you have thoughts on Graham Platner and his tattoo?
Oh my God. I I don't even know where to begin with that one. So, Graham Platner is a very unique case, at least from my perspective, because he is a through and through Bernie-crat, right? Like, he is a Bernie hand-selected pick who was running for office, and right out of the gates, he was like, I'm anti-Israel. I don't think we should be giving weapons to Israel. I don't think we should be doing anything with Israel if they're going to continue doing a genocide, right? Like, and that was a unique position. And then on top of that, he was pro-Medicare for all and numerous other Bernie-style positions. And what was interesting to me about that whole saga is that in spite of him being like very obviously a grunt force, machine gunner for the Marines, which are sometimes known as crayon eaters for good reason. He went on. What the fuck is going on? Did I just get botted? What the? Why the fuck is someone botting me right now? Holy shit! We went from 36K to 50K. Shore leaving Croatia and split and got the most obvious Nazi tattoo, the third most common Nazi symbol, a Totenkopf, on his chest. In spite of that, Maynard seemingly didn't care about that situation at all. And I think that's a really interesting moment in American politics for where the liberal base is moving.
Yeah.
Because for far too long, I think the organs that work alongside the Democratic Party that are like liberal adjacent or, left adjacent, whatever you want to call it, have often weaponized a version of identity against the left flank, right? While simultaneously telling their audiences that electability actually revolves around moderates. Moderate positions are how you win. Yeah. And this is actually a real battle that is still currently taking place within the Democratic Party. The Welcome Pack piece that came out, the Welcome Pack report that came out was, again, another version of this exact same thing. And I don't think liberals are responding to that electability argument, or rather, I think they think now, after failure from the moderates, especially the second failure against Donald Trump, again, an incompetent, monstrous fascist, they realize like, no, maybe the left flank, left populist position is the actual electability argument. And maybe we were deluded.
Well, but like, okay, so
they're giving a lot of grace to Graham Platner is what I'm saying.
And I think Graham Platner has handled it basically as well as you can, which is another model of how the left can understand people's flaws and how you can own the mistakes you made in life and how they made you who you are today and arguably a better person. But like, just like, as you say, one of the top 3 Nazi tattoos, like, is that not up? Like, what?
No, I think it is.
I mean, what? So, like, are liberals just becoming more okay with that? And like, is that a problem?
So
I don't know.
There's 2 things that I think about in that regard. I think that we'll see, because we saw it with Zohran Mamdani, right?
Yeah,
like,
and I want to talk to you about
a lot of liberals were very forgiving of like the faucet of misinformation and angry lines of attack that were completely, in my opinion, unjustifiable and outright racist at times. Like the notion that he is like a scary anti-Semite is honestly an incredibly permissible form of bigotry, like institutionally permissible form of bigotry. The assumption that like he's gonna be anti-Semitic, he's anti-Israel, he's Muslim, come on. Like, and these are very real fears. Like, we don't treat white supremacy in that same vein. Like if someone were to say, as a white Christian, as many have, right? I think like desegregation is a real problem. I think that I don't want my children to live in a racial jungle. We would be like, okay, that's your problem. Like, you need to deal with that on your own. But in this circumstance, because, Jews are also a marginalized identity in the United States of America, and there is a lot of historic violence towards Jewish people on the virtue of being Jewish, that there is this conversation that takes place where we place a lot of emphasis on whether or not there's this like broad majority of Jewish people that are truly terrified of Zohran Mamdani because he's seemingly or considered to be anti-Semitic. And I think that's genuinely a racist position to apply to someone like Zohran Mamdani. I think it's ridiculous. He's done nothing and said nothing that is even remotely anti-Semitic, and yet
he staked out a position on Gaza that is comports that is not in favor of what Israel is doing, but that does not mean he is an anti-Semite.
And here, I'll give you an example. Sometimes I like to think about it as like, if Zohran was like a white Christian guy or a Jewish guy, and he was saying that, would these arguments stick?
Yeah.
Would there be this much? I mean, look at Graham Platner. He's a totem-cov tattoo.
This is what I'm
and
saying.
even then, people are like not even making that argument, right?
Give him a pass.
So my point is like, that is institutionalized Islamophobia. There's a big part of it. I don't like to talk about it too much because it's like a lot of people tap out when they hear that and they're like, I don't want to hear this. Oh, whatever. Here we go again. But the reason why I'm saying it here is that like we shall see if the liberals are more forgiving of guys like Graham Platner because he's a white dude and they think that is like the primary version of electability for liberals in general?
Yeah.
Or is it because he came out of the gate swinging with very leftist, like left flank policies, and that's the reason why they're forgiving of him? And I think the contest I'm paying close attention to is Abdul El-Sayed, a person who has none of the red flags whatsoever, another person that basically has an infallible reputation and has actually more experience in politics as well. He's run for the governors. He failed to defeat. I think it was Whitmer that he failed to defeat on a Medicare for All campaign, and he is the real deal, right? And he's also another early Bernie pick. He's also anti-Zionist. We shall see if liberals are just as forgiving of a brown guy that is running on a very similar campaign to Graham Platner.
Without the tattoo.
Yeah, without the Nazi tattoo, but he's a brown guy. Does that mean that it's like scarier? My point is a white dude with a Nazi tattoo.
I think we know the answer, don't we?
Well, I
think we know the answer.
No, I don't.
As a brown person, I think I know the answer.
No, I think that's defeatist. And that's, I don't abide by that. I recognize that there's a hurdle, right? There's a hurdle, there's a higher threshold, but you can climb it. And you can make up for that higher threshold by instilling messaging discipline and then not stepping on any landmines to the best of your ability. And also just
Are you proud of yourself for supporting an unrepentant mass murdering rapist? Did you just not watch the video? Did you not hear the words that I literally, even back then,
focusing on
over and over again. This is November 13th, 2025, before many of you knew even who Abdul El-Sayed was or were barely learning about Graham Platner, where I say, look, this guy has a lot of red flags, okay? But liberals are seemingly very forgiving of his red flags. Is that because of the populist messaging, or is that because he's a grunt force guy who is, thinking like a woke, but acting like a chud, walking like a chud, thinking like a woke? Turns out he wasn't just thinking like a woke either. He was also thinking like a chud. Yeah, this was during the height of the Platner mania. The problem is people will now try to utilize the Graham Platner allegations to imply that like all Bernie crats are this way. Okay? To imply that all Bernie crats are like this. Stop acting like you weren't falling for him too. I mean, I told you honestly and sincerely, given the information that was readily available at the time, that regardless of my scrutiny, that he was a far better candidate than Janet Mills, who was pro-Israel, and a far better candidate than Susan Collins. Okay? Which is true. What are we talking about? But there's an amount, and there's also verifiable information. Like, for example, if there was verifiable information from his time at Blackwater where he opened fire on a civilian car or something, or if there was verifiable information from his time in combat and it wasn't pure conjecture or pure speculation on what he may or may not have done, right? That would be an entirely different conversation that we're having or would have been having at the time. Okay? The same goes for the previous New York Times reporting on him being from the same victim who, to the New York Times, said that it was unsettling,
versus verifiable allegations of rape. If new evidence presents itself, then I'm going to change my perspective. It's that simple. Is it possible we see Maine voters shrug it off like before? No. No, I don't think so. Especially because it comes with a faucet of red flags and heightened tensions from before. I don't think all of those previous allegations actually. I don't think those previous allegations actually make this situation less credible. I think it makes it more credible. It lends credence to the previous allegations all of a sudden, because this is not just a random accusation with no additional evidence. This is a clear-cut instance of verifiable sexual assault allegations. It's completely irredeemable. Platner's source of strength was that people passionately committed to volunteer for him. On his campaign Discord, people are sharing their feelings of betrayal, heartbreak, and resignation. He has lost his base. It no longer seems like a question of whether he will drop out, but when, and whether his campaign, by virtue of an overwhelming primary win, will be able to influence who replaces him. Yeah. I would go so far as to say that the timing of this is maybe not even potentially a rat, but instead the timing of this is most likely so that there's an opportunity to swap out the candidate for the Democrats. Like it lends even further credence to the fact that one of the accusers, the victim, Rasico, was someone who clearly is both wronged by Graham Platner, but was conflicted on revealing this information because there was like this higher priority in her mind that while she wanted to warn people about him, at the same time was worried about both the impact that might have on her well-being, because when this happens, when things like this happen, obviously no one believes you. People attack you. Graham Platner was a very popular person at this point, like a person that has a lot of followers and a lot of fans. They're all going to come after you. You're worried about that. And then there's an even larger weight on your shoulders where you feel like you are now like in control over the Democratic Senate majority. Like, think about that. Like, that's huge. If this is, because when you are talking about the Democratic Senate majority, you're talking about potentially millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. Will the Democrats gain the Senate majority and be able to hold Trump accountable, be able to set up hurdles in front of Donald Trump? Like, that's a huge ordeal. That's why I was so critical of Jake Auchincloss for casting aside the Senate majority because he was worried about Graham Platner's perspective on Israel. It was ridiculous at the time, right? Because that's huge. There are plenty of people I despise, even in the Democratic Senate, that I would never cast a vote against in order to build a reliable coalition against Donald Trump, to hold Trump accountable, right? Adam Schiff. I voted for Adam Schiff. He's my senator. He's a freak. He loves Israel. Not a great Democrat at all. And I voted for him. Why? Because you have to have some level of accountability against this administration. It's just something that you do, you know? Being part of the military is a red line, a war criminal of itself, as soldiers are actively part of the institution. The only way that can be supported is repented, and if they've renounced serving and advocate against it. Same with the IDF. Yeah. Okay, that's your standard. I have a different standard, okay? Like, no, being a part of the military is not a red line, dude. And it's the same for IDF as well. I've already said this. It's entirely dependent on how you maneuver this landscape, okay? Yes, I get it, dude. You think everyone that's a part of the American military murdered children personally, directly. They ate the babies. I got it, okay? If we're having a conversation about the institution in and of itself, about anti-imperialism in and of itself, that's an entirely separate conversation. I hate having this back and forth with like 8 to 11 people that maintain this supposedly quote-unquote principled stance when we're having a conversation about elections. Okay, please. This is a totally separate conversation. Okay, you're brilliant. You're morally righteous. You're pure. The best possible candidate is someone who, the best possible candidate is always and forever going to be an art history PhD that went and worked at Starbucks and has your background. Suspiciously is identical to your lived experience. We got it. Someone who has spent most of their time reading theory. It's no person who has ever been a part of the American military is ever redeemable. You got it. Thank you. IDF is crazy. You can't put purity politics, that shit. Yes, I can. And I have. I've literally interviewed people who have served in the IDF. Anti-Zionists. Now anti-Zionists. And you have too. You just don't know it. Okay? If you've ever read, for example, any Israeli new historian, with the exception of Benny Morris, you have read the works of prominent anti-Zionists who served in the Israeli occupying forces. Shut the up. Okay? Please. I've never wavered on this principle that someone's past is only indicative of who they are as a person now if it corresponds to their current behavior. Okay? Norm served in the IDF? No, Norm is an American. He's not an Israeli. He's not a new historian. Anyway. Yes, Avi Shleim, Ofer Kasif, who then became a conscientious objector. Initially, I believe Ofer Kasif was a paratrooper. Became a conscientious objector who refused service. Avi Shleim is another Israeli historian who is a prominent anti-Zionist, a part of the new historians who uncovered. Take the 4K ring off your finger next time you read Imperialism, you dog, says monastic servant. Which is the 4K ring? You're hallucinating. Again, if your first inclination is how do I make this about a Twitch streamer, you're a moron. I guess he's talking about the cock ring. Anyway, but yeah, the comparison here that I made was between Graham Platner and Abdul al-Sayed all the way back in November 2025, where I, had my skepticism, my scrutiny, and still maintained a position that he was far better than Janet Mills, given the positions that we knew. Okay. But what I said at the time was, were people in love with Graham Platner because he's a white guy? Or were people in love with Graham Platner because of the policies? That remains to be seen. Because the very same people that attack Graham Platner, who are now feeling vindicated, are still attacking Abdul al-Sayed. As a matter of fact, something very strange happened yesterday to one of my prominent haters, Sarah Longwell, who said, does anyone have the Sarah Longwell quote from yesterday? Or was it Sarah Longwell? It was Sarah Longwell, right? I think. Oh, no, it was Shannon Watts. It wasn't Sarah Longwell. I apologize. It was Shannon Watts who said, I will never support any candidate who proudly campaigns with Hasan Piker. To which Deep responded with, this is an endorsement of Graham Platner. To which she responded with, yes, Graham Platner is better than Abdul al-Sayed. Something along those lines. Shannon was, not Abdul al-Sayed. Probably the worst possible time to come out with an endorsement of Graham Platner over Abdul al-Sayed, a take that will live in infamy. Yeah, another one from the centrist. The difference between el-Sayed and Platner and why Platner is a better candidate than el-Sayed is el-Sayed is perceived as a far-left wacko. Platner is perceived as a military douche with a temper. Voters love douches. They hate socialists. Again, this is what happens when you literally define your worldview off of opposing me on whether or not you think that a candidate campaigning with someone like myself is indicative of their viability or not. Yeah, look, Shannon Watts endorses Graham Platner for Maine. He hasn't asked. Persuade me. I appreciate that he hasn't aligned himself with Hasan Piker. It's the one smart thing his campaign has done so far. Seems like you're trying to pivot as you never liked him. Didn't we already know he killed Afghan civilians? Seems like you're trying to pivot as you never liked them. No. I was willing to let my scrutiny of his background aside, given that he was far better than both Janet Mills at the time and also Susan Collins. His policies are what mattered to me. But there is certainly a level of things that you have definitely done that are verifiable and credible that I'm willing to forego my scrutiny over. And obviously, a verifiable sexual assault allegation goes past that standard. That's it. That's it. The lesson for the left, you should only ever run Muslims. I mean, this is a joke, but there is an advantage that comes along with running a Muslim candidate or a black candidate or a brown candidate. You have to overcome great trials and tribulations to get to that point. Yes, you have to be an overachiever with an untarnished reputation. So yeah, it's kind of baked in, yes. They are held to a far greater standard, which was ironically the point that I was making on that Pod Save America episode, making the comparison between Abdul El-Sayed and Graham Platner. What is this? Wow, I love that it has to get to sexual assault for him to not be viable. Yes, of course. What are you talking about? You think that's not a significant accusation? If there was a significant accusation that was verifiable of a direct war crime, then that would also be, again, relevant. That's it. Where's your Mexico shirt gone? I mean, I wore it yesterday. I'll wear it again in the future. CNN interviewed Platner's accuser as well. Wait, really? In an interview with CNN, Jenny Rasico, 41, said the attack occurred in the main town where she lived in 2021, 2 years after she and Platner began casually dating. The interview will be broadcast on The Lead with Jake Tapper. Rasico said one night in November and December 2021, Platner showed up drunk at her house. It's definitely over for the record. It's definitely over I think it's definitely over for Platner's campaign. I mean, if that wasn't clear. Will he still win the primary? He already won the primary. What is this? You're going to call Hasan Piker the same name as y'all called me or so? Rape is a hard line. Not sure why that's controversial. Hasan Piker on political Platner. This is curtains. That's the trifecta. Okay, that's the trifecta of a reliable allegation. It's holy shit. I believe this. This accusation. I believe this allegation. They now have a new goal since Platner isn't fighting it. Tar Morris Katz and invalidate left-leaning political operatives. I mean, listen, I need you guys to understand something, okay? Morris Katz and the Fight Agency are a very good ad agency, but they are an ad agency, okay? They are not a political organization. Morris Katz worked with Micah Lasher, okay? Micah Lasher is a massive supporter of Israel. Morris Katz and the Fight Agency, while I like the ads that they make, their job is to make ads. They will sometimes work with wonderful candidates and boost them, okay? And they will sometimes work with candidates that I don't agree with and I oppose, okay? This is entirely separate from the Democratic Socialists of America, okay? This is entirely separate from a political movement. They could potentially work with political movements that are aligned, even candidates that I like, even candidates that I work with, okay? But at the end of the day, it's just an ad agency. And I have made that very clear from the start. It doesn't mean anything. If anything, the person who is a movement builder that will be harmed from this association will be Bernie Sanders. Do you understand? I suspect that Graham Platner betrayed the trust of a lot of people, including probably the Sanders wing, Ro Khanna. Do you think Bernie knew about these before endorsing? Fuck no. Are you crazy? Absolutely not. Wait, so the accusation is true? Rasico's testimony, especially given that there is conversations that she had with partners far before Graham Platner even ran for office, have the telltale signs of a reliable accusation. Okay, a real, verifiable, credible allegation of sexual assault. If there's corroboration, then what, like, that is, if you have corroboration if you've talked to a therapist about it and you have like any evidence that you can point to, if you've talked to a friend about it at the time, that is the hallmark of a reliable allegation. That even lends credence to other accusations. Because one of the things that we went through the Me Too era, right? Believe women does not mean women are incapable of lying. Believe women means don't reflexively disbelieve women. And there are certain things that you can look at in an accusation that lends credence to it. Okay? One of the things that you can look at in an accusation that lends credence to it would be, are there other victims? Do they have similar experiences? Have any of the victims talked to someone else? Did they write in their diary at the time? Did they tell another person at the time? Right? Did they tell a therapist? Do they have a therapist? Do they tell a therapist? Rasico's testimony has the hallmarks of a credible rape allegation. It's impossible to overlook, okay? The messages of him, like him being a dog or whatever, like him around talking to other women, all of that stuff is, it shows that someone is of not the highest moral character, but that's things that, that you can add on and people can make a decision on whether or not that means that this person has the best mindset or not. But this is something beyond that. Okay. And this is something that I made clear in the last batch during the New York Times reporting. In the New York Times reporting, I told you if there was like verifiable sexual assault, that would be irredeemable. This is verifiable sexual assault. It's irredeemable. They quote you in this new Politico article. Platner says he's taken on the time to reflect his candidacy. What did they quote me as? I didn't even give a quote to Politico, but I guess it's from the stream. This is Curtin's progressive commentator Hasan Piker said of Platner's candidacy while reading the article of to his Twitch audience. I believe this allegation. Fellow progressive commentator Emma Vigeland called the allegation immensely damaging while arguing that Platner had not been fully truthful during his past scandals. The Platner campaign insisted that nothing new was coming, and that was obviously not the truth, just devastating, she said on X. I never trust the media completely, so why would I trust them when they have a story with no credible, verifiable evidence? This Politico story, even though the outlet Politico is obviously run by a person who is maybe a little bit biased, the article itself features actual reliable evidence. What is this? If you're going to start listening to women in the party, then stop listening to this vile misogynist who insisted we all blindly support an unvetted, unqualified, untrustworthy man. Okay, I'm going to quote retweet it and say, Shannon yesterday was saying she could support Platner over Abdul because Platner had not campaigned with me while Abdul had. Don't try to rewrite history, Shannon. You should be focusing on your energy to get Troy Jackson as a replacement. Anyway, Troy Jackson, Paige Louder, Shenna Bellows, Troy's DSA. What Kami says. Thank you for the 20 gifted subs. So this means tomorrow all the pedophiles and rapists will be expelled from the Republican Party, right? No, of course not. And that this would be a stupid metric. Susan Collins, 2028, new home. The Hasanabi Twitch chat. I mean, no, this is not. You know what? I'm not even going to. Heard you sponsor this amazing video. Austinox is always right. What is this? Oh, AOC says of Graham Platner, I haven't waded into that primary. She absolutely needs to stay 10,000 feet away from that race. Yeah, he was correct. It's so easy to see who Hasan supports. He goes to New York City. He goes to Denver. He phone banks for them. He fundraises for them. He did none of this with Graham Platner, but some of you only care about the words you hear from your computer screen. Yeah, I know. I also wanted to interview Graham Platner. I wanted to hear his own perspective in his own words early on, given the questions that I had about his background, about his perspective. And their campaign shied away from it. Their campaign shied away from it when they saw some of the things that I had said. And I was very open about it. I told you guys at the time. That doesn't mean I'm going to lie to you and say that Graham Platner is not a better candidate than Janet Mills or a better candidate than Susan Collins before all of this new information came out. Suck my dick. You know what I mean? It's funny to think they considered you to be too controversial. I think part of it was because they thought that I would, hound them on certain things that they consider to be a weakness on the left flank. They didn't want any scrutiny from the left. According to your Redditors, you're not a part of the left. Guys, who cares? Okay. Yeah, Desiree Townsend also has some information. Journalist who broke the story on Mitch McConnell's cardiac arrest says he's brain dead per her sources. HasanReactions is one of the best ones in the React channel.